The rain had stopped, but the scent of storm still clung to the air, sharp, electric, heavy with unfinished things. I stood there, heart pounding, watching as they pulled the cuffs around my father's wrists. Douglas Hayes, the man who once owned everything and everyone, now stood defeated, drenched in the same rain that had always washed his sins clean. He turned toward me for one last look. There was fury in his eyes, but also something else, something hollow. "You don't understand what you've done," he hissed. "Yes," I said quietly, my voice trembling but sure. "I do. I ended the silence you built." The agent's LED came out into the flashing lights. The sound of the car door closing felt like the final note of a song I'd been trapped inside for too long. Inside the safe house, my mother sat slumped on the couch, her hands trembling around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her face looked both fragile and fierce, like glass that had cracked but refused to break. When I knelt beside her, she looked at me through tired eyes. "He's gone," I whispered. Her voice came back soft but sharp. "No, Brittany. He's finished. That's not the same thing." And I understood. My father's fall wasn't revenge, it was release. Agent Morales entered quietly, a folder tucked under his arm. "The files you uncovered sealed it," he said. "Offshore accounts, fake contracts, the recordings. He won't talk his way out this time." My mother nodded, relief flickering like a candle flame. "And Miranda? She turned herself in an hour ago," Morales replied. "Her statement matches everything." For the first time in months, the room felt still. No tension, no running, no lies, just the sound of breathing that finally belonged to us. Later, I stepped outside. The moonlight shimmered across wet pavement. Every drop of water reflected a different shade of peace. Mom joined me, silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You know, artists say you can't paint light without shadow. Maybe that's true for people too." I smiled faintly. "Then it's time we start painting again." The next morning, the world woke to headlines blazing across every screen. Douglas Hayes arrested in federal fraud scandal. Wife found alive after fake death in high-stakes family betrayal. The empire my father built on secrets collapsed overnight, but I didn't feel vengeance. I felt freedom. Weeks later, I walked back into what was once Hayes Development. The golden logo that once symbolized his control was gone. In its place, a new sign gleamed beneath the morning light: Hayes and Daughter, restoring what was lost. The days after my father's arrest blurred into one long, sleepless stretch of silence. News anchors replayed the same footage again and again. Douglas Hayes, once a respected real estate tycoon, now a man in handcuffs, his suit drenched, his eyes hollow. Every channel had a theory. Every article had an angle, but no one knew the truth. Only I did. That he wasn't just the villain in our story, he was also the architect of our escape. Chapter 1. The weight of quiet. It's strange how quiet can feel heavier than noise. For weeks, the new office of Hayes and Daughters stood as both a monument and a grave. Gone were the golden signs, the sleek marble halls, the whispers of power. We'd stripped everything back to bare walls and soft like a blank canvas. Mom spent her mornings sketching by the window, hands stained with charcoal, eyes distant. Sometimes, she would hum a tune from before everything went wrong. Other times, she'd just stare at nothing, as if replaying the years that had been stolen from her. As for me, I buried myself in paperwork. Restructuring, rebuilding, rebranding. I told myself I was creating something new. But deep down, I knew I was just trying to fill the silence. And then one evening, as I was closing my father's old drawer, I found it, the thin black envelope, taped underneath the desk, hidden like a confession. Inside, one silver key. Old, worn, accompanied by a single note, written in his sharp, familiar handwriting. "For when the house is truly yours." No address. No explanation. Just a key and a ghost's whisper. Chapter 2. The cabin. I tried to ignore it. For 3 nights, I left it on my desk. But every time I walked by, it called to me. On the 4th morning, I gave in. I traced the serial number engraved faintly on the key's head. After hours of digging through digital archives and property logs, I found it tied to one of his offshore accounts. A private cabin in northern Washington. I didn't tell Mom, I just drove. The road stretched endlessly, the sky bruised with rain clouds. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had nearly vanished. It stood small and alone, half swallowed by forest, vines creeping along its roof. The kind of place meant to be forgotten. When I unlocked the door, the hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. Inside, dust coated every surface. The air smelled like pine, paper, and old regret. On the mantel above the cold fireplace sat a framed photograph of family, taken years ago. My father stood tall behind us, his hand resting on my shoulder. For a moment, my chest ached with something I didn't want to name, and then I saw the box, the small, steel container tucked beneath the mantel, sealed with a simple lock. The key fit perfectly. Inside were folders. Hundreds of them, each labeled with careful precision, projects, transfers, confidential. But one caught my attention. It was marked Eleanor Project. Chapter 3. The truth inside. When I opened it, I stopped breathing. The file contained financial statements and signed contracts, all tied to my mother's art foundation, the Eleanor Collective, which she believed my father had destroyed years ago. But the truth was different. He had been secretly funding it for years, quietly funneling money through fake shell companies, protecting her from being implicated in his own fraud network. Every cruel word he'd said to her about failure and wasted talent had been an act. A shield. He had become the villain in her eyes so she wouldn't be destroyed with him. He had built a wall of hate to keep her safe. I dropped the papers, trembling. The man I had feared all my life, the man I had helped destroy, had been sacrificing himself in ways we never saw. The sob escaped before I could stop it. The cabin's silence seemed to listen. For a long time, I just stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of his choices, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt grief. Chapter 4. The return. When I returned home that night, rain streaked the car windows. Mom was sitting by the fireplace, sketchbook open, a candle flickering beside her. I laid the folder in front of her without a word. She hesitated before opening it, as if she already knew it would hurt. As her eyes moved across the pages, her breath caught. Then again. Her fingers trembled. She whispered, barely finding the words. He was protecting me. I nodded. He destroyed everything, even himself, just so no one could use you against him. Tears welled in her eyes. He loved us in the only way he knew how, through control. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching. For a long while, we said nothing. The candlelight danced between us, flickering against the wall's light and shadow, like our past. Finally, she whispered, maybe it's time we forgive him, Brittany. For what he did, and what he couldn't be. And for the first time, I didn't resist. I let the tears come. Chapter 5. The foundation. Months later, the foundation reopened under a new name, the Eleanor Trust. Art from Ashes. The grand hall buzzed with energy. Reporters, artists, and young dreamers filled the room. The walls displayed paintings from survivors, people who had lost everything and rebuilt their lives through creation. When I stepped on stage, the microphone trembled in my hands. But my voice didn't. Our story isn't one of destruction, I said. It's one of rebirth. It's proof that even when the world burns, something beautiful can rise from the ashes if you choose to see the light. Applause erupted, but my eyes found only one face, my mother's. Tears shimmered, but her smile was radiant, and somewhere deep inside, I felt at peace, real peace. Chapter 6. The last goodbye. That night, I drove back to the cabin one last time. The moon was bright, the forest whispering softly in the wind. I walked to the fireplace and placed something on the mantel, my father's old cufflinks. The same ones he wore every day of his empire. Then I whispered into the still air, goodbye, Dad. The house is finally ours. The fire crackled softly, though I hadn't lit it. A breeze swept through the open window, carrying with it the faintest trace of his cologne, cedarwood, and smoke. I didn't turn around. I just stood there until dawn painted the horizon gold. When I finally left, the cabin stayed behind, swallowed again by forest and time, but I didn't feel haunted anymore. I felt free. Epilogue. The sky. After rain 6 months later, our company was thriving. Mom's art hung in galleries again. The Eleanor Trust had helped dozens of young artists rebuild their lives. And me, I finally learned to breathe without fear. One afternoon, as I locked up the office, I noticed something strange. A letter slipped under the door. No return address inside, one line in familiar handwriting. For when the house is truly yours, I am proud of you. No signature. No name. But I knew. Tears blurred the page as I looked out the window. The sky was breaking open, not with storm this time, but sunlight. For years, I had lived under my father's shadow. Now, I walked in my own light, and as I whispered into the open air, I realized the night truth finally spoke was also the night we were born again.